Hey everyone, welcome into the Irish NFL show. It is, a big week ahead of us. Sunday night here. We are delighted to be joined by a special guest from Croke Park Stadium. We're presented by Trust Gaming and Matchbook Betting Exchange. And a warm welcome to our new sponsor this week and hopefully long into the future as well, Mini Arcade Systems. More information on them throughout the show. Delighted to be at the home of the GAA. Fantastic, one of the best stadiums in Europe, if not the world. Croke Park, a true honour for all of us to be here, joined by Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary, Mark Cockerell, and also joined by, Sky Sports analyst, CFL, CFB, NFL, American football extraordinaire, Jeff Reinebold. Jeff, a warm welcome to Ireland. How are you?
I'm great. I apologize, guys. I didn't wear my Broncos stuff. I guess that's the uniform of the day today, but, I'll get it next time.
Did you not get the email, Jeff?
I did not know this was going to happen, but sure, it's all good. Here, it's great to have you here, Jeff. Obviously, chatting online all season. It's been great to have you on the show over the last few weeks. You're in Ireland. What's your first impressions?
Well, my first impression is of this stadium. Like, this is an amazing, amazing facility. We got to get an NFL game in there because that is a beautiful, beautiful facility. And, listening to you guys, it's the tradition and the history of this stadium. It's just amazing. Hill 16 and, the story you told about the night the rugby team played in here and played England, and, that would have been awesome.
Jeff, I suppose we've been talking about, the growth of the game in Ireland over the last couple of years in particular. You've seen it kind of in terms of online, on Twitter, the interaction, but what do you make of, you're here, we're doing a coaching clinic this afternoon. You can see the way fans are responding to it. Just your thoughts on the growth of American football in Ireland.
Well, I tell you what, I can't remember how long it's been. It's been probably 10 years. Guy Darren O'Toole, who's from here in Dublin and was the head coach at Trinity University at that time, had got in touch with me when I was doing my stuff for Sky and asked me to come over, and it was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. I came over to do a clinic for coaches, and then we put a practice on one day, just open practice, and any kid in Ireland could come show up. And I mean, we had guys, the practice lasted an hour and a half, and we had guys driving from, all the way from Belfast, all over, driving 3 hours to practice for an hour and a half. And, I just really fell in love with the fact that these kids, how much they have to sacrifice to be able to play the game. And, it's not, American kids are so spoiled because they get everything. And these kids, I really wish that our fans could see just, how much these players and coaches love this game. And the game is exploding. And what you guys are doing is really a big part of that, because the more, the game's talked about, the more you guys, chop it up, and, the guests that you have on continuously, you've done a great job to help promote the game, and that's how it's going to grow.
Jeff, what I find really interesting and really exciting in a way for the league and for Europe is the fact that the league have kind of recognised over the past few years in particular that there's players this side of the world that have the attributes to become an NFL player. We've had Ty Leader on, who unfortunately can't qualify for the academy because he's a kicker. There's Irish punters in the college game now. There's one in Georgia that's done particularly well. At some stage, I'd imagine we're going to see a player from Ireland potentially make the NFL.
I don't think there's any question. I've been banging on this for 20 years, is that you're not, just because you were born in the United States doesn't make you a better, football player. Doesn't, wherever you tie your shoes on, that doesn't make you a better Gaelic football player than a kid who would learn the game and grew up in Chicago, Illinois. It's not about that. There are great athletes here in Ireland, and as the game grows and more kids participate, and we see things like Effie Obata go and play in the National Football League and play, not just be on a team on a practice roster, but I'm talking about a contributing member of a team, then there begins to be belief in those young players that there's a way, that there's a pathway. And again, that's one of the things that's been a passion project of mine for 25 years, because same thing, when you see how much these kids in Europe want to play and how much they have to sacrifice to play and how much a helmet costs and all of the other things compared to what an American kid gets privileged with, I really, really pull for them. And I know that there will be kids from the UK, there'll be kids from Ireland, there'll be kids from all over the world playing, and there are right now in the National Football League, and there are more and more of them coming.
Jeff, obviously, every year there's surprises. I mean, this year it's good to see that there's at least two people who are doing the much that they can to make the Broncos relevant in the postseason. The Bengals are a big surprise, but what amazes me about the NFL is year on year is every year is different. Every theme is different. The game keeps evolving. I mean, we can hark back, or I hark back to the 2007 Patriots bringing in the spread offense, how the offensive attacks have developed and evolved, and defensive game. Thinking about it in an international sense, you've got, 12-year-old kid today. What advice would you give, or what are you looking for at the clinic you're going to do this afternoon in terms of the opportunities that might be there in 10 years' time? Where's the game going? What's the next skill set that you think is going to be the focus?
Well, I think the game is changing because the rules of the game have changed so much from what it was like when I learned to play. But I think one of the things that we want to leave here when we leave this afternoon with the coaches and with the players is that there are certain skills that are required to play the game, fundamentals that are required to play the game, no matter what the schematics are of the game. You may play in the 4-3 on defense or the 3-4 or 4-2-5 nickel, or you may be in spread, or you may be in, two tight ends. It doesn't matter. There's about 12 what we call transferable skills that every player needs to be able to perform at a high level to play in the National Football League. And we're going to share those 12 transferable skills and how to develop them with the coaches. Because, I again, we talk about the players. I salute these coaches over here even more because these are guys that give of their free time to allow players a chance to play the game. And now if we can help them, we can pass on some of the information that we have to them so that they can help the players, then I think it's a win-win for everybody. But obviously, there are certain things, parameters basically that you work within in terms of what the physical requirements are by position for a football team. But then when you say that, one of the best players I've ever coached, I've coached 5 different Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. And the Heisman Trophy, for those fans that are listening that may not know, that's the player that's selected as the outstanding player in college football. I've coached 5 of those guys. And the best one I've ever been around was no bigger than me. And Doug Flutie transcended the game. And he didn't have the speed. He didn't have the size. He didn't have all the things that they said he needed to have. Right now, we watched maybe the greatest single year that a receiver has ever had in Cooper Kupp. And if you take Cooper Kupp's combine grades, you'd say there's no way you even draft that guy because he's not fast enough, right? So you can transcend the physical requirements, but in general, as players start to play, it helps them understand where they need to play to be successful.
Doug Flutie had a hell of an arm, though, Jeff.
I'm
Boston College, Miami, wasn't it?
It's amazing about Doug. And, I think this is true of elite athletes in any sport. Doug had the ability to not only elevate every player on our team, and you never thought you were out of a game. And he's renowned for that last second throw against Miami, in the Orange Bowl to win for Boston College. But I saw he did that numerous times during the course of the season. And additionally, Doug, like all great athletes, could make the other players on the other team and everybody in the stadium, the officials included, a spectator, because you just marvel at what he could do.
Well, it's fantastic to have you here, Jeff, and we obviously really appreciate your support for us, and great to have you on Irish soil. And again, we're just very grateful to Croke Park, the GA, and everyone involved in getting this sorted today. So much history in this stadium. Just finally, before we look to the next few segments, talking about Ireland, you mentioned there about Croke Park, Jeff, on the way in. Everyone here, the lads will agree, this stadium's seen so much history. I guess most recently Dublin's incredible run. Brian, Jeff, this is a perfect stadium for an NFL game. The size of the field, the size of the stadium, it would really be perfect if you look at the stadiums that are in the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, I think that this facility, obviously, when you talk about the number of people you can put in here, the sight lines, the tradition, the history, the fact that it's right in downtown Dublin, there are a lot of reasons why this would be a phenomenal place to have a game. And I think too, fellas, I'm just going to throw this out there because it's really rare that you have a field with the pitch size to play a Canadian Football League game, and you could do that in this stadium. And I know that there's a strong impetus right now in the Canadian Football League to get an international footprint. And if the NFL's not interested, you guys ought to sell it to the CFL because this would be a great place to play a CFL game.
So you've heard it here first on the Irish NFL show. The Canadian football game 2024 at Croke Park.
I see, and it's not out of I'm not out of the realm. And I think what I think the fans would love it. And certainly the National Football League is the ultimate. It's the highest level of competition in our game. And I know they've been here before, but I cannot imagine that there are stadiums. And I've been to Munich, and I've been to Frankfurt, and I've been all the places, Mexico City, Tokyo, all the places that they play internationally. And this stadium, for sure, can stand up with any of those.
The last college game here was 2014. Harrison Butker played in that game?
Yeah,
Right?
Georgia Tech. Yeah.
So the other games since have been moved to Lansdowne, the Aviva Stadium. So that's kind of where the commitment is at the moment. But again, the fact that they've done it here previously, it works. They know it works. They should be reconsidering.
And obviously as well, the Rooney family's connection to the island. On 1997, the Bears played the Steelers in
Yeah.
Croke Park. I was 6 years of age.
I was here.
Did you come to the game?
I did. I came to the game. It was a sea of terrible towels, but they didn't convert me. I remained a Bronco.
There was a sea of terrible towels and one orange suit in the middle of it.
Well, I don't know, Jeff, if you heard it, but we had Bill Cowher on the show, and he shared a great story about that. He said the Rooney family turned around to him. It was like a lovely piece of Waterford Crystal to the winners. And our Rooney turned to Bill Cowher before, and it's a pre-season game, and you're usually keeping it pretty vanilla. And he said, Mrs. Rooney really wants that Waterford Crystal.
No pressure.
So he goes to the OC and the DC, and he's like, guys, we're breaking out a few plays. And it's like, it's a preseason game, coach. I was like, no, we're winning this game.
I think it was the night before at the evening meal. He actually said, "We're winning this game tomorrow. You just get yourselves ready."
That's awesome.
Let's
That's
hope
awesome.
we get to see that maybe at some point in the future in Croke Park. We have a number of different segments today. In our next segment, we're going to look at the head coaching positions because we haven't really had a chance to do it because we've been focusing so much on the Super Bowl. We're also going to talk about a guy that retired this week. You may have heard of him, Tom Brady. 22-year career. I know Mark will get the Kleenex tissues in for that segment. And then we're going to have a quick look ahead at the end to the Super Bowl next Sunday. We'll be in LA next weekend. Can't wait for that. Next Saturday, 6:30 p.m. Ireland, UK time. And again, just a big thanks to our sponsors. And we'll be back in a moment just after this quick commercial break with our next segment. Welcome back into the Irish NFL show from Croke Park in Dublin, 1 week away from the Super Bowl. Are you devastated that he's now no longer a player?
Yes and no. The funny thing for me on this is the Raiders, to be fair, I think have run a very sensible process. They said we need to replace our GM and our head coach. So let's do what they did in San Francisco. Let's do what they've done in other places. Let's take a package. Let's say these two people are going to come. They're going to be joined at the hip. And we're not going to have, hopefully, the backbiting between the head coach blaming the GM blaming the head coach. The last few days in Raiderland, obviously with Gruden and Mayock, with different scouting teams, different analysis for the draft, is not a dysfunction you want to repeat. So actually, Josh McDaniels is one part of the story, but Dave Ziegler, the Patriots director of pro personnel going over to the Raiders, is potentially even a bigger part of the story. Pats have been knocking out of the park on pro personnel assessment and drafting and free agency moves in the last while. And he's definitely someone that's come through the ranks there, very highly regarded by the organization, and he might end up being the bigger or better hire. It's funny, there's maybe a little bit of controversy around head coaching hires this year, guys. Who knows? But the Raiders don't seem to be tainted by it to the same extent. But if you look at the last three Raiders head coaches, they've all actually been out of the game before. They've been out of a head coaching gig. They haven't been gone straight from a head coaching gig. They've been out of a head coaching experience before coming back in to a head coaching role. And in fact, Josh McDaniels is longer away from being a head coach than John Gruden was, which is a random statistic. He's a very good offensive coordinator. He has to have learned from his experience in where was it? Oh, Denver. That's
Well
where
done.
it was.
Well done.
Don't know. Must have been inspired by that. But
Wait now. Does that count Josh McDaniels' dalliance with Indianapolis? Because
well, and I was going to address that. So it is, I think, most remarkable though the fact is he has definitely signed. They wouldn't have let him go on the plane if everyone guaranteed you're not going to stand us up at the altar once again. And now, in fact, obviously he has started to build the team around him. Patrick Graham has it been confirmed or is it? Yeah, it's been confirmed. Leaving the Giants, joining the Raiders as their defensive coordinator. The job he's done, and he needs that compliment. I mean, McDaniels has been offense. You know, defense is important. So Patrick Graham previously worked with him when he was linebackers coach at the Patriots. That could be a good connection. And I was going to bring in the Colts, Jeff, because, of course, the irony of McDaniels not going to the Colts was that his pick for DC, Matt Eberflus, did still go and did still join, and now he is very much in the contention for head coaching jobs around the league as well. So his influence still gets seen in many ways.
Yeah, and you know, one of his young offensive assistants with the Patriots has agreed to go to the Raiders as the quarterback coach. So Rob Ryan, who we'll get in the speculation game a little bit right now, but Rob Ryan, who just stepped away from the Ravens this week, and McDaniels are very close friends, and I would not be surprised if we don't see Rob be back in Raiders with the Raiders. And I sent him a text the other day, and I said, "Hey, man, you did your best work in silver and black, so I hope it works out for him."
And Rob Ryan won Super Bowls with Josh McDaniels when he was a low man on the totem pole, effectively, back in the early first part of the Patriots dynasty when Rob Ryan was the linebackers coach. So
exactly.
It all goes around. Be very interesting to see how he develops there in silver and black, and I'm sure Denver fans will love to see him again twice a year, given his record and the way he left town there.
The biggest loss and Denver good for losses, but Josh McDaniels is responsible for our heaviest ever defeat to the Raiders. So seeing Josh McDaniels for the Raiders, it's going to be very interesting. I think Broncos fans have a lot of memories of Josh McDaniels' era, the trades, the videotaping of other teams, the losses. So yeah, he certainly will have to have improved quite a bit. He's obviously very talented as an OC, but HC is a very different gig.
And Michael, one last thought. How are the players going to react? They obviously were lobbying directly in relation to their interim coach staying on. They're not. Derek Carr's going to the final year of his contract, and Derek Carr can be good Derek, and Derek Carr can be bad Derek. And how McDaniels develops him or what he puts in place is going to be the fascinating part of this story. I think Derek Carr can thrive under Josh McDaniels, to be absolutely honest with you. I think he's an underrated quarterback, but this is what the drama and dynamic we'll see in Las Vegas.
Well, we've already had the CFL exclusive in Dublin. Thanks, Jeff, for that. I've heard whispers of Jaguars Raiders in London next year. So if that's the case, hopefully McDaniels gets home. Let's see what happens. Yeah. You'll be a happy man if Rob Ryan's in London next year, Jeff.
I would be, because he's a great guy. He's a really fun guy to be around, a great football coach. And, it's going to be interesting. We're talking about how much a guy learns through that experience. And I did that experience. And when you go from being a coordinator to be a head coach, you think you know, but you can't know until you sit in that office for the first time. And I'm sure Josh will be much better equipped to handle it the second time around. And like you said, Mark, having a guy that he trusts and he knows in there with him is going to be a big, big key. And then bringing Patrick Graham back is a tremendous move. Every head coach that goes into a situation, and this one is no different than any other, the first thing he's got to do is he's got to win the room. He's got to win his guys. And the fact that Carr was outspoken about, wanting to keep Rich Bisaccia around, and I don't think that's going to affect their relationship. I think Josh has been around enough to know that when he goes in there and he steps up in front of that football team, then he's going to have to bring the goods. And if he does, they'll buy in.
My statement on the London game is an independent statement. It is neither true nor false, and that is all TBC.
Schrodinger's
That's my
statement.
views only.
That's
Mark,
a disclaimer.
But Michael, I was just going to say, as I say, no drama. They conducted their search. They figured out who they wanted, and they hired them. And the Raiders have had enough drama this year. But some head coaches hires have had a bit of drama, Brian, haven't they?
Well, I'm happy, Brian, that the guy's name is called Brian. I think it's great.
Brian Dable.
Brian Dable.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's not so much about Brian Dable initially. It's about the fact that there's a new GM, Joe Shane, and it's a package essentially. They both come from Buffalo. They've since brought in coaching staff from Buffalo, so it's very much the Buffalo way. Joe Shane was highly touted for a number of GM jobs prior to getting the Giants job. General consensus is it's a smart move. The Mars have finally looked to move away from hiring in-house. I think it's the first time since 1979 that we brought in a GM who hasn't been directly connected to the organization. And then I think it was inevitable that Brian Dable was going to come in, and predominantly more so to try fix Daniel Jones, because I don't think Daniel Jones is on the same level as Josh Allen, but if you look at them, they do have similar attributes. He's athletic when he gets going in terms of the run game. He does have an arm. His inconsistency. When we had Sam Monson on last off-season, he said, Daniel Jones won't deliver the season, but it won't be his fault. It'll be everything around him, such as the offensive line. And that's consistent in which what John Mara said at the press conference the other day. The Giants have done everything to screw the kid up, to mess him up. They haven't put the right things around him. I think part of the reason why they felt Brian Dable was the right fit, he can come in. We've seen what he's done with Josh Allen. He took Josh Allen after 2 years when he was very inconsistent and has made him the player that he is. And I think, to be honest, it was cemented in terms of him getting the job in his performance in Kansas City, albeit they lost the game with the 13-second fiasco at the end. The performance and the level of play that Josh Allen put on that night, that's the expectation that somehow they can get that from Daniel Jones and then put weapons around him. The Patrick Graham thing for me is a big loss, because I could see all the reasons why Dable got the job, and he straight away at his press conference said, there's a job here for Patrick Graham. We believe he's going to stay on as defensive coordinator. He went for the head coach position. He didn't get it. He went for the head coach position in Minnesota. He didn't get it. He took a lateral move to move from Miami to the Giants as a defense coordinator. And essentially that's what he's done now. So it's a big loss. The names out there now is Wink Martindale. He's obviously been released by the Raiders as defensive coordinator. That looks to me like it would be a very smart move, because what we saw from the Ravens throughout the years, and it was a bit of a surprise that he was let go by the Ravens. I'm delighted. Most Giants fans are happy with the move. It's kind of floating under the radar because of the Flores situation during the week. A lot of talk was Mara wanted Flores and Shane wanted the new head coach. And what Mara did say was consistent from day one. The GM will select the head coach this time, not the organization. We will not get involved in the hiring process, which is good to see, because for too long they have been putting themselves in positions that they shouldn't be.
Absolutely, and it's going to be interesting what happens in New York. So much change in the league over the last few weeks. Colin, you're going to look at the Broncos. Nathaniel Hackett, who was the OC for the Packers, is taking over.
Yeah, I think a little bit of a surprise. The rumors had been that it was going to be Dan Quinn, and their rumors probably going back all the way to November. It seemed like Vic Fangio's days were numbered, so Dan Quinn was talked about, and then when Hackett got the job, Quinn removes himself from the job pool and says that he's staying at the Cowboys. So I wonder around what the Dan Quinn's thought process is there, but Hackett is in. It wasn't John Elway or Joe Ellis who conducted the hiring process this time. It was George Payton, and so he's gone with an offensive-minded guy, which is a change. And I think for Broncos fans, the change in energy is good. Vic Fangio was kind of a grumpy grandpa, and in his first press conference, he questioned Von Miller, which I talk about getting off on the wrong foot. When you walk in and your first remarks are, I think Von Miller's been okay, but I expect more of him, from a guy who, won the Broncos Super Bowl 50. Hackett has brought a lot of energy. I suppose the big question mark is, what does it mean in terms of quarterback? And ultimately, for any head coach, you're going to live or die by your quarterback. So you can have the best head coach in the world, but if they can get by with a season, right, maybe you can have a Case Keenum type season where a journeyman goes out and does an amazing job, but ultimately you've got to bring somebody. The rumor is obviously Aaron Rodgers, but then he's gone and bought a house in Tennessee. So I would say, and I would hope, and I don't think George Payton is the type who would hire based solely on, we're definitely going to get Rodgers. One thing though has been I talked about the energy. I saw him last night. Jeff, I'd be interested in your take on this as a coach. Hackett has really endeavored, even in the first couple of weeks, to kind of be part of the Denver community. He was at the Denver Nuggets game last night. He was participating kind of beforehand. He had the jersey. It was all stuff that Vic Fangio never did. Vic Fangio was very much football focused. He went to the podium. He kind of had a jersey put on him, but he couldn't even name players, whereas Hackett seems to have come in and really wanted to get involved in the local community. How you've talked about winning over the players, but how important is winning over the fans in the local community when you take a head coaching job?
I think that particular situation, it's really important, because this is an organization that was as proud as any in the National Football League and had a tremendous history, and had won Super Bowls and been to playoffs numerous times, and again, great players and a real love affair with the community. And that's fallen apart now a little bit, and the uncertainty about ownership in Denver's been a big part of that. The fact that they can't seem to get the quarterback thing right. This is a team that when we watched them win the Super Bowl a few years ago against Carolina, we said, they're going to be here for years to come. We thought this has the chance to be a dynasty. The defense was all young, and then they just imploded, and it's been a embarrassment in the community. And I think that Nathaniel's doing the right things. Now, bottom line is the bottom line. You got to win, but you can win the hearts and minds until that time. And I don't know. That was really an interesting job to me, because it seemed like everything was in place except one position, and whether they're going to be able to do what you're talking about, bringing a stopgap guy, because that's kind of what Teddy was going to be. But they're not the only franchise in the league that's in that situation. And I think to be able to compete in that division, where you've got David Carr and you've got Patrick Mahomes and you've got Justin Herbert, you've got to find a quarterback some way, and that'll be, I'm sure, on everybody's mind. I think the first thing that needs to happen for the Broncos to get turned around, though, is they need to get the team sold, get new ownership, and then go from there.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was just on that, Jeff. I was going to say, I don't think anybody can blame Dan Quinn, even if he was offered it, if he turned it down, because you don't have an owner, you don't have a quarterback. So it's not actually that attractive a job in relation to it. But I was going to ask you a question. Actually, come back to the Giants situation with Patrick Graham, Jeff, because you've coached for many, many years, and it's not just the team dynamic and the player dynamic and the ownership dynamic. it's that relationship between coaches. And I'm curious. Patrick Graham was a linebackers coach at the Patriots when Brian Daboll came in as a graduate assistant, effectively. And then he grows and becomes an offensive assistant, and then goes and grows his career and is a great coach. But is that maybe part of the dynamic there in terms of the Giants to say, like, hey, there are guys coming in now that's my head coach and is my boss who, when we started, my career hasn't gone the same way. I mean, he was the kid out of college, the kid off the street. I mean, does that come into the factor? Is the human element when the coaching dynamic a big part as well?
Again, human dynamics are always a part of it. Anytime you're putting together a staff, and these staffs now are 20, 25 guys. So you got a lot of personalities, you got a lot of egos. It's an ego-driven business. So, I can't speak to those, individual, mechanics or individual relationships. But I do know this, when you look at the Patriots, and this is important to understand, almost exclusively the Patriots bring in entry-level guys. And then they basically let them cannibalize one another, and the strongest survive. And you look at, that's just the way it's been done there forever. That's the way Bill Belichick wants it to be. That's how he came up in the Baltimore Colts organization. He started out driving from Baltimore to Washington Dulles Airport to pick up players and bring them back that was his job. And then eventually he got into scouting and coaching and so on and so forth. But that's the way you're going to come up in that organization. They don't want, and I've heard him say this, he doesn't hire veteran coaches because he's not interested in what they're doing. He wants to teach you what you do at New England, the Patriot way. And again, that there's a lot of reasons why that works, and that works particularly well in that situation where there's one person that you need to please, and that's Bill Belichick. And I think that's one of the reasons too why a lot of his guys, and you talk about Mcdaniels, and you can go through them. I mean, right down the list, they've all kind of flirted with success for a little bit, but then can't seem to capitalize on that. And I think part of it is because they're working in an environment that's not like what they were used to in New England. And then they try and do it like Bill does it. Well, that's really difficult because Bill he answers to Mr. Kraft, but he makes all the football decisions.
I just want to jump back to the Broncos for a second. Jeff, last April we did a live show for the draft, and the guys were, I suppose, convinced when they hit number 9 in terms of the order that they were going to select a quarterback, and Justin Fields was on the board at that stage, and obviously the Bears traded up with the Giants. They picked Patrick Surtain. If you look at that pick individually and production levels over the season, great pick. But in hindsight, do you think the Broncos really should have went for the quarterback at that stage?
I don't. My thing with Justin Fields was
not necessarily. I don't mean necessarily because it could have been Mac Jones. Should they have gone for the quarterback at that stage?
I think they, again, their situation was so unique in that, they were. There's a dynamic in that organization where John was a great quarterback, Hall of Fame quarterback, and he has struggled to be able to find one of his own. I don't know how many, Paxton Lynch, you go through Simeon, you go through bunches and bunches of them. Yeah, exactly. And they can't seem to find one. And I think that there was so much pressure on them. And then when they brought in Teddy, and there were still enough people in the building that felt Drew Lock could get it done, they said, well, let's go with the best available player. I think it was a good choice, personally, because I'm not sure that even Mac would have functioned well in that system last year. I'm not a big Justin Fields fan personally. So when you got out, and this is going to be even tougher this year because there are fewer quarterbacks in this draft, but there wasn't, in my mind, a great number of what you would consider first-round talent quarterbacks in the draft last year. There were a lot of guys that got drafted there, but that's because they got overdrafted, not because they were talented enough to be first-round picks.
Yeah, and you're talking about Justin Fields there. The Bears have Matt Eberflus as their new head coach. You were speaking off camera about Doug Peterson, obviously Super Bowl champion with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, and you know what, Doug was one of our quarterbacks. We talked about 5 Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. Well, 1995, our quarterback to start the season was Gino Torretta, and Gino had been a Heisman Trophy winner with the University of Miami. And then I can't remember where somebody allocated him to us, and may have been San Francisco. And about week 4 or 5, he was struggling. And so the head coach called the NFL offices and said, "Hey, you better get us another quarterback. This guy's having a hard time." And they sent Doug over. Doug Peterson came over, who was allocated by the Packers, I think. And he was our quarterback for the last 6 games of the season and did an outstanding job. And what a great person. And this is a kind of an interesting story, too, because that was 1995. I did not see Doug again until 2008, and I'm recruiting at SMU, and I go to a small private Baptist school in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I asked where the head coach's office were, and they said it's back in a trailer on the back of the campus. And I walk back there, knock on the door, and the coach says, "Come on in." Open the door, and it's Doug sitting there. And Doug was a high school coach in Shreveport, Louisiana. 5 years later, he wins the Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. So it just goes to show you that, coaches in the NFL come from a lot of different backgrounds. But he got an opportunity to go back, be a quarterback coach, I think, for Andy Reid. And then that's how it went.
Yeah, O'Connell is the new head coach of the Vikings. Jim Harbaugh steps away there, goes back to Michigan. He was interviewed on National Signing Day, so he's not going there. The Saints and the Dolphins are to be TBC in the coming week. Any final comments, Mark? Just on the coaching situation?
So O'Connell, I don't think it can be confirmed till after the Super Bowl, but it's generally being reported that it's going to happen. But I mean, we have to address the fundamental elephant in the room in one respect, in that you look at all these hires. O'Connell, Eberflus at the Bears. I mean, is that really a head coaching job? I suppose technically it is. But you look at Nathaniel Hackett, you look at Brian Daboll. 4 guys all getting their first shot at a head coaching gig. Josh McDaniels getting his second shot at a head coaching gig. But then you look around the rest of the league and say, well, where's Raheem Morris's or Todd Bowles' second shot? Where's the interviews for Eric Bieniemy?
As well, yeah.
And there's a number of other coaches that could be mentioned in that breath. So obviously the allegations, the lawsuit that Brian Flores is bringing against the National Football League, when you look at the pattern of behavior that's occurred this offseason, you have to say there are serious accusations, there are serious questions to be answered, and indeed, obviously, it's not for us to sit and judge. We are not party to any of those discussions or what is occurring in relation to it, but it raises very valid points of concern for a 40-year-old coach who, and we will, don't worry people, get to the actual Super Bowl and people still in the postseason. We will get there. But bearing in mind his last appearance in the postseason, he leads a defense as defensive coordinator that only gives up 3 points in the entire Super Bowl. And at 40 years old has, put a very difficult position for the rest of his career, but potentially for the right reasons and everything. So I think there are serious questions to be asked in the NFL in relation to that, and it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge that question.
I think the NFL has admitted, and that it's a flawed system, and that. But here's the issue that, as I see it, that makes it so very difficult. The National Football League, what is the National Football League? So let's define the National Football League. It's not the players. It's not the coaches. It's not the commissioner. It's not, anybody that works in the NFL office. It's the owners. And now we have 30 owners because you guys don't have an owner, and when Bronco Land and the Packers don't function with an owner. So there are 30 owners who do the hiring and the firing. And it bothers me that the National Football League gets plastered with this when the commissioner does not have the power to go to an owner, Mark Davis or anybody, and say, you have to hire this guy, right? So the onus is on the ownership, the owners' hearts, the owners' minds. And that's a really difficult thing because the league, let me just say this, the league has done so much to try and ensure that minorities get an equal footing in hiring. Now, is it enough? No, because we already recognize that it's a flawed system, right? They recognize it's a flawed system. And when you see reports of teams circumventing or in the Broncos case, it wasn't circumventing the rule. It was basically just going through the motions about the rule that says the Rooney Rule that says you have to interview 2 minority candidates not from your building, because Patrick Graham had interviewed with New York, but he's an in-building, so it doesn't qualify for the Rooney Rule. When Brian came back in and interviewed, that satisfied the Rooney Rule. The problem that happened was Belichick reportedly sent a text before Brian Dable even that Brian Flores even interviewed, that Brian Dable had been hired. And that made that interview basically a farce. If that is in fact the case, then the Giants have got some answering to do. And Denver has some answering to do. Those people are all mentioned in this suit. And what's interesting about the suit, he made it a class action suit, which means that others can join the suit. So there's been already talk of people outside, ex-coaches, guys that have been through this situation, joining the suit. And that's when it's going to really get interesting to see how it comes. But we know that the system is flawed. We know that there has to be more done. And, again, but I don't know how you mandate a change of heart in an owner.
So maybe that's where I was going to go with this question, Jeff. You didn't touch on the Texans either. So the Texans still haven't got a head coach, and Michael has called out rightly the Saints and the Dolphins. Do you think the 3 organizations can step away from everything that's gone over the past 10 days and still follow the process they believe is correct, or do you think they will be under
I think there's just there's going to be so much pressure on those organizations now, both from inside and outside, right? And I think that it was interesting that, the Saints have already gone on record as saying that they thought Brian Flores did an amazing job in his first interview with the Saints. Do I think he will get a job out of this, or do I think it will ruin his career? I hope not, right? Mm-hmm. I hope that a guy who has done as much as he's done, he's the only guy in 20 years that's put 2 back-to-back non-losing seasons together at Miami. And, obviously the word was when he got fired and surprised everybody, they said it's because he couldn't get along with people. And they mentioned the fact that he's been through 4 offensive coordinators, 4 offensive line coaches, such. Was that the reason, or was it a smokescreen because of, his relationship with the owner?
The tanking pieces also come
well,
into question.
That's
Should we treat separately, really?
Well, and that is the question now. Was his refusal to tank, to openly strategize to lose games, is that the reason that he was fired, which is what he claims? And if that's the case, then now we're talking about the integrity of the game. So this goes way deeper now than just the Rooney Rule and minority hiring. When you start talking about the integrity of the game, and this may be, if that is in fact true, if those allegations are true, it may be something that's big enough to bring down Mr. Ross in Miami and they force him to sell the team.
And I just want to say, Jeff, on that, the integrity of the game, potentially allegedly being paid to, lose games in a league now that is open to gambling on a regular basis is not a pleasant combination of factors.
and Hugh Jackson said that he didn't say that they offered him money, but he said bonuses were structured in Cleveland to, quote, tank for draft picks. That's a slippery slope. Now we're talking about something that's going to be really, really interesting as we go forward.
The Black Sox and various other franchises in different sports will be interested in that. I just want to say, just for the benefit of our viewers, of course, the NFL did come out with an express statement almost immediately after the suit was filed to say that the allegations are false and they'll be defending them to their fullest. Obviously, very reassuring for fans like in New Orleans and New England, for example, to know that they can already concluded the investigation so quickly. So that's
well,
reassuring.
It's interesting though, when they said that, they said it's in relation. Their statement, they came back 2 days later and said their statement was in relationship to the hiring procedures, not what had gone on in Miami,
pieces,
not what had gone in. The Giants and Denver and Miami are going to have to independently defend themselves.
Yeah, and just I think you've raised a really interesting point around like the owners and that process. But I do think it maybe runs even a little bit deeper, because if to me Mike Tomlin, who's had 15 winning seasons, was asked earlier this year, was he going to go back and coach college? I think the league has to do better. The owners have to do better. The media has to do better. I do not believe another like Bill Belichick wouldn't have been asked that, and Tomlin was right to call it out at the time. He said Sean Payton wouldn't be asked that question. I think that Brian Flowers has raised a valid point around this, and the fact that as we sit here today recording this, Mike Tomlin is the only minority head coach in the league is something. Remove the Flowers allegations and just take it at that. That is something that absolutely has to change.
Yeah, there were 7 2 years ago. 7 minority head coaches 2 years ago.
Yeah, and again, everybody talks about the same basic core group of guys. Why is Eric Bieniemy not have a head job? Right? He's an offensive coordinator for most explosive offense in football. Why does he not have a head job? Why does Byron Leftwich, who was the offensive coordinator of a team who won a Super Bowl and got deep in the playoffs the second year, why does he not have a head job? You know, again, those are questions that we can't answer. I mean, Leftwich was a logical candidate to me in Jacksonville, a place he played, right? But it didn't work out. Now, the word was that he didn't see eye to eye with Trent Baalke, and that he wanted his own personnel guy, and that's when he pulled his name out of the deal. So there's a lot of depth to the stories, but I agree with you guys. The fact that there's only one minority head coach out of 32 teams in the National Football League, that's not good look for the National Football League. Minimally not a good look.
I think one thing that we can all agree on here is it's going to be an interesting offseason. 7 months will fly by because there's going to be that much to talk about. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Tom Brady retiring, and then we're also going to have a look ahead to next Sunday in the Super Bowl. Stick with us on the Irish NFL Show. Welcome back into the Irish NFL shows from Croke Park in Dublin, Ireland. We are joined by the incredible big Leeds United fan, Jeff Reinebold. Shout out to your dads, Cookstown, Tyrone. Why do I say Tyrone? Because Tyrone won the All-Ireland here a few months ago. I'm going to stop talking now and start talking about another great player in a great team. Tom Brady, 22 years, retires this week. Obviously, a bit of talk. Ironically, we had just finished recording the show last week. Myself, Colin, Brian had popped on, done a bit of discussion around the rumours. Mark wasn't here, so I'm going to give Mark his stage now. First off, Mark, are you okay? Because it's hard as a Patriots fan and as a Bucks fan to talk about this, but that's some run, Mark. And I remember we had a conversation 2 weeks ago. We all said, will he be playing in September? And you said, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt.
I thought he would be. I thought he was like 100,000 yards, because that's what he would have gone over if he played again. Combined passing yards when you combine postseason and regular season. I thought he would give it one more go. But somebody made a great point about Brady is that if he'd won the Super Bowl this year, then he wouldn't have retired. Because just like he famously said to Teddy Bruschi coming out of the Pro Bowl back in 05, he said, turned around to him at the Pro Bowl, because it used to be after the Super Bowl, after they won the Dynasty Super Bowl, the one that was 2 in a row, turned to him and was like, no one's ever won 3 in a row. And Bruschi gives this story as like, that's the mentality of the man. He's kind of like a week after winning his second, his 2 in a row Super Bowl, he's like, what about the next one? What about the next one? And if he won this year, I don't think he'd have been able to resist. But what can say that hasn't already been said? I mean, 22 years, but it's really only 20. He had one season where he gets injured after 76 yards. Bernard Carmel Pollard, I think, if I can remember correctly, who injured about 4 Patriots players in a 3-year period. Thanks very much. And his first year, obviously, 1 pass against the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. So it's really 20 seasons. And out of those 20 seasons, with Tom Brady as quarterback, you're guaranteed to go to the Super Bowl once every 2 years. You're guaranteed he's going to get a Super Bowl MVP once every 4 years. You're guaranteed you're going to go and win 10 championship games, but get to 14, including, almost unbelievably, 8 in a row. He was a leader. He's not dead, so I shouldn't talk about the past tense. As a player, he was a leader who he elevated the players around him. And we've talked a lot about very talented quarterbacks that don't seem to elevate the team around him, elevate the players around him. And he made the plays that needed to be made when they needed to be made. Sometimes that's a 6-yard check down. And sometimes that's the best pass or play you could do. And sometimes it's like 3rd and 19 against the Jacksonville Jaguars, down 10 points, and 3rd and 17, you absolutely have to do it. And the fastball comes out to Danny Amendola down the middle. Patriots fans and some Bucks fans for 2 years, but mostly Patriots fans and players of fans who played against him will acknowledge that he stepped up in the moments that had to be stepped up to. And the stats just roll off. More passing touchdowns, more passing yards, more wins, more. He's number 1 in all the categories, but this is the one that sums him up. It was always about winning. And if you take Tom Brady's regular season and postseason wins, and you take away, minus off, every single regular season game he lost, 73 games, he still comes out with more wins than any other quarterback in history. More than Peyton Manning, more than Brett Favre, even if you take that away. And that probably is the biggest testament to him. Elevated his teammates and won football games. And no, Michael, I'm not really all right still.
Yeah, because I felt bad that you weren't on the broadcast whenever we had the chance to record it. And Brian, I know you're going to give through the next 2 minutes and not talk about the Giants. So, incredible career for Tom Brady.
He went through all these stats, and he forgot to mention the unbeaten season because there wasn't one. Because it didn't go unbeaten.
That social post, the social post from the New York Sportsman, was very good.
To be honest, we haven't had much to crow over for the last 10 years. So I'm fortunate that my team was on the right side of 2 Super Bowls against Brady, because it would have been a lot worse for everybody else across the league. One game in particular, I always think back. Everybody goes on about the Falcons game, but the Super Bowl against Seattle, and it's always the Malcolm Butler interception. But Seattle had been there previously. They won a Super Bowl. They were up by, I think it was 10, 13 points going into the 4th quarter, and Brady still brought them back. The Falcons game, whilst it was such a significant comeback, 28-3, the Falcons hadn't been in the Super Bowl for a long time. They had a serious wobble. We all expected Seattle to close that Super Bowl out. And if Marshawn Lynch had got the ball, they probably would have won the Super Bowl. But the fact that Brady was able to take them back in that game against such a big, strong, significant team that Pete Carroll put together, for me, was probably the bigger achievement of probably all the Super Bowls he played in. I was surprised he retired. I felt he looked at the season, he looked like he was as good as ever. But a lot of stuff has come out this week since he's announced retirement. And one thing that's standing out is that he gave a commitment to the family that it was 2 years in Tampa Bay. And if you look at the contract and how it was put together, a lot of the money was dealt very early on in the contract, which gave him the additional security, as if he needed any more. But there was a commitment there, and he's honoured the commitment to the family that he's stepping away. So, look, I think in years to come, people don't have perceive him as a different person because of their love or dislike for the Patriots. But overall, I don't think we can argue he's absolutely fantastic player and great for the league and great for all of us who watched him over the last 20 years.
Jeff, I'll come to you first before we get Colin. I can't wait for Colin's reaction as well. Jeff, I look at this obviously as a historic moment in the league but also at the potential ramifications of this. I personally don't think we see Gronkowski playing in the NFL again. And I think people will tell me to wise up with that fact. But I think guys like Bruce Arians, Rob Gronkowski are now asking themselves, how long do I wait? Do I give it a month? Do I give it until the draft before I walk away? Or I personally think it's just the end of that cycle. But regardless of that, it's a historic moment in the league, because regardless if you loved him, if you hated him, this guy will be looked back on in 100 years as a legendary figure in the league.
Yeah, there's you guys are all right on everything you said, and each person has their own game, their own Tom Brady moment that maybe means is special to you in some kind of way. To me, when I think about him, the greatest accomplishment in my mind that he had is not something you can measure. It's not something that you can say this percentage, that percent, or whatever. It's the thing that is most difficult in my experience being around high level athletes. The most difficult thing is to continue especially once you've had success, and a lot of success, and the more success you have, the harder it gets to prepare, the will to prepare to play at the highest level. That's what usually gets players before their legs go, before all of that. It's they can't keep the competitive juices flowing enough to push you to go to the gym when it hurts, to not be able to sit down and have waffles with your kids in the morning because you don't eat that. The incredible amount of dedication that it would take to play 22 years in the National Football League. I don't care what position you play, kick it 22 years. But when you're a quarterback and you have all the mental pressure that comes with that, and all the physical pounding that you take in 22 years, to continue to want to come back and come when you have nothing else to prove. It's been 10 years since he really had anything to prove to any of us. He was going to walk in the Hall of Fame at that point. And to continue to push yourself, and to have watched him on the practice field was something that was really amazing. For a guy who was not as athletic as others at the position, to play at that high level, and to practice as hard as he did, and to be as focused as he was. And you talked to Sebastian Vollmer, and he said 5 o'clock in the morning, the first guy in the building was Tom Brady, and he would go in there and work out because he knew he wasn't gifted with great genetics. He had to work continuously on his body. And then when they practiced, he practiced harder than anybody else. I actually saw this happen one time. He was not a pleasant guy to be around if you didn't know what you were doing at wide receiver. And a rookie kid missed a blitz pickup, and Tom took the ball during the play. Normally, the quarterback would go to another receiver. He took the ball and threw it and hit the guy right in the back of the head. And the kid turned around, and Brady gave him it was a death stare. And that kid knew that, hey, listen, you better, if you don't know your blitz pickups, you can't play for us. And that level of, competitiveness, that level of attention to detail, all the things that it takes, those are the things that are, numbers are numbers, right? I mean, there's always going to, they said nobody had ever hit 60 home runs. Well, that's been done a bunch of times, right? The same thing's true with, will somebody win 7 Super Bowls? I don't know, but it's a number that's reachable. What's harder to get is that incredible competitiveness, that competitive drive. And that's what I think defines him more than anything else.
Jeff, he did it to Aaron Dobson on the field, I think, in a Patriots-Jets game, ran the wrong route, and Tom Brady didn't hide his displeasure at his wide receiver during a live game, as when he was a rookie as well.
Sebastian Vollmer told me that the biggest thing with playing with Brady was you didn't want to be the one that gave up the sack, because he would give you that look, and you didn't want to get that look.
Colin, obviously, I think lads have said a lot of things. For you, Tom Brady, I think you said last week, was it loved, adored, hated, adored, never ignored sort of thing, yeah?
Yeah, the greatest competitor there's been in sport, bar none, across the board. The most talented QB, no. The most entertaining QB, no. The best QB, yeah. What he could do with pressure. Pressure does funny things to people. It does funny things to quarterbacks, did funny things to Peyton Manning, does funny things to head coaches, Andy Reid. Brady had an ability to deal with pressure like I've never seen any other QB. It didn't matter what the situation was. Kipling's poem famously says, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters just the same. And that's what Brady did. It didn't matter if he was winning by 20 points. It didn't matter if he was losing by 20 points. The game was the same. The game was essentially 0-0 and he had to win it. And that's, I think, what separated him, for me, from any other quarterback, was just that the way he was able to treat it. You've seen QBs just go to pieces when they've been down, right? We saw in the Manning cast when the Cards were losing a few weeks ago, and Russell Wilson was saying, you got to be up, you got to be G'ing up your team, and it cuts, and there's Kyler Murray just sitting dejected. Or we've seen it where teams are way ahead, and all of a sudden it's getting too cocky. Brady never did that. He was always just preparing for the next drive, and to me, that's what separated him. I'm not surprised though that he walked away, because we called it out earlier in the season. It was the first time this year that Tom Brady looked human. He never looked human before, but in that first game against the Saints, the ball wouldn't do. It was the first time I've seen it. The ball wouldn't do what he wanted it to do, and he looked at his hand and he just went, why is that happening? That's never happened to him before, and it happened over the course of the season. He was still brilliant. He was still better than average, but he wasn't Tom Brady. He missed Cameron Braid open because he just couldn't get it to go in that playoff game. And look, he will. You're right. He will be talked about in 100 years. But as a Broncos fan, Von Miller. What in the playoffs? Von Miller against Tom Brady, happy days, and Von Miller did it to him again against the Rams. But no, seriously, Brady is and will remain. If I see a competitor like him again, it will be a long, long time. He is a legend in the NFL. He transcends the sport. You can talk to people, right, in Ireland who know nothing about the NFL, and they will know. Waterford Whisperers News did a joke this week, right? It's a satirical website saying local man's knowledge of NFL reduced to zero with Brady's retirement.
Colin, when you said Manning cast there, I thought you were talking about the time when Peyton Manning asked Joe Buck, how do you keep yourself focused in blowouts? And he goes, yeah, I had that problem when you played in that Super Bowl against the Seahawks.
Yeah, but being a Broncos fan and being Peyton in Super Bowls, it tended not to be good.
I mean,
it's really individual.
Michael, I mean, the one question is how the NFL are going to honour him. I mean, we can rename I don't think the Super Bowl MVP award has a name, so the Tom Brady MVP award sounds good. It's got a nice ring to it, to be awarded in the Super Bowl. But we're building up to the Super Bowl week, so it's only right to acknowledge the man that's played him more than any other, won the more than any other. So it's good that we're having this discussion about the wondrous nature of Tom Brady. I know you love him so much. So
what if we take like maybe a ball pump and we rename it to? Yeah, that was a joke. But that was a joke. Can I just say now, you're right in what you're saying there. Like even like people in my family don't watch the sport. We're saying, I thought she's Tom Brady. I think that sums a lot of things up. Proud Irishman in the sense of his ancestral history. He's very proud to have relatives from County Cavan, County Cork. I for one think it's art. And Cavan as well. To the Cavan ones here. Ye will get Tom Brady on. Somebody sent me a message this week. I think that's the ultimate goal for this show, is to get Tom Brady on, or maybe get him down to Virginia or down to Cork or something for the crack, boys. But what can I say? Yeah, see the crack. As a man that's been to Calvin a good few times, I'd love to have a wee interview with Tom Brady and Calvin. You ever been to Calvin, Jeff? No. Have you any idea where that is? No. There we go.
You'll have to bring your wallet up there, Jeff.
Well, yeah, you will. I have to. Oh my God!
Slander against Cavan people on this show.
Anyway, we're gonna take a quick break and we're gonna come back with our Super Bowl preview, Super Bowl picks. Looking ahead to there is a game next Sunday, and we should probably talk about that game. Next Sunday, we're gonna be in LA next Saturday. Final part of the show. We'll look ahead to next. Welcome into the final part of the Irish NFL shows from Croke Park in Dublin, presented by Trust Gaming, Matchbook Betting Exchange, and our new partners, Mini Arcade Systems, who are following along with us on this Super Bowl week. The Super Bowl is this weekend, coming next Sunday, 11:30 p.m. Ireland UK time. You can watch it on Sky Sports NFL. Obviously, got Jeff here as well, and on BBC One Northern Ireland as well. Now, we'll have a show on Saturday from 6:30 p.m. UK Ireland time. More information at the end of the show. Mark, you told me to get you in here first. You got some breaking news you want to tell us.
Yeah, I mean, as we're recording, and I know this is going to have gone around a lot more, but we've just seen some breaking news coming from the US. Actually, just saw on Twitter there that the NFL's released an announcement. In order to maintain the competitive balance of the league, they're very disturbed that obviously this is the second Super Bowl in a row where one of the teams is going to have home field advantage. So to remove this as a risk in all future events, they've announced that every Super Bowl from now on will be held at AT&T Stadium at Arlington in Texas to ensure that we never see this type of event again. So yeah, back to you, Michael. But
I thought we were going straight to Denver on that one.
That was genuinely the first thing I seen when I woke up this morning was that on Twitter. So well done. I could see where it was going there. But yes, that would be interesting. Dallas nearly had the Super Bowl. Really excited to go to LA next week and be a miss of me now, Jeff. Just to quickly get your opinion just on this game coming up next week, your initial thoughts, and also tell us about Sky Sports because you've got Calais Campbell over in the SoFi Stadium apparently, and obviously a big show in London.
Yeah, we've got Calais Campbell, we got Warren Moon, Baldy's going to be on the field, and then we'll be in the studio. And Kay Adams is going to join us for the pregame show. So it's going to be a star-studded event. I think it's going to be a great game, guys. I think this is really an interesting game in that you got a team on how you build a football team, right? That's, as a coach, you're always thinking about those kind of things. And you got one organization that basically, bought a group of stars, leveraged their future for a group of stars to hopefully put them over the hump. The other side did it differently. They got a young quarterback that they believed in. They drafted well, and then they put a group of free agents on defense that they didn't overspend for. And that's going to really give them an opportunity to continue to build that team down the road. I think right now that the Rams should win the football game. Although, when you're talking about the Bengals, you're talking about a team that has belief, and emotion is such a big part of this game. And when you hear a guy like Trey Hendrickson say, "I went from New Orleans, where I'm playing on one of the best defenses in the league, to the Cincinnati Bengals because of Joe Burrow," right? That tells me an awful lot about that football team. So I think it's going to be a great game. I think the Rams should win the game. Again, this is a big game for Sean McVay, guys. I mean, he's got to prove that he can coach in a big game. And last weekend, his misuse of timeouts was alarming, and that'll get you in a big game.
Inside the Huddle every night from Tuesday, 9 o'clock on Sky Sports. Yourself and Neil and the gang are on from 10 o'clock next Sunday. I'm sure everyone in Ireland and the UK will be checking in there as well. Brian, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say this season as a whole is probably arguably one of the best seasons we've seen in years, and it's reflective of how competitive the playoffs were, how many games were won on last-second field goals. And for NFL fans out there who are watching the game next weekend thinking, will I ever see my team in the Super Bowl? And there's quite a lot of fans out there that will think that. You look at the Bengals last year, they won 4 games. They only had won 2 under Burrow before they got injured in week 12. And then they only won 2 games thereafter. One was against the Texans and one was against the Steelers when Schuster danced on the logo on the halfway line and brought obviously more motivation to win that game. And they've gone from winning 4 games last year to now being in the Super Bowl. So it can be done. It's also, Colin always discussed the fact that the league wants, equal balance competitiveness. And now we've seen it. We've seen a team gone from essentially being nothing for the past 10, 15 years, very uncompetitive, to now being in the Super Bowl. Yes, a lot of it is down to the fact that they've got a head coach, but Zach Taylor last year was questioned whether he'd be around, and within 3 to 4 years now, he's in the Super Bowl.
Guys, you know that's New York Giants self-talk, right? Positive self-talk.
I see Mark.
Now he says it. Now he says it. Sorry. A guy says to me the other day, I watched back your video and you picked the Giants to go to the playoffs. And I said, yeah, they won 6 games last year. And he goes, yeah, 6 games. I said, yeah, they spent $200 million in free agency. They had a top 10 defense last year under Patrick Graham. They looked like they were going in the right direction with Joe Judge. And he says, yeah, well, you're completely wrong. And I said, the Bengals are in the Super Bowl and they won 4 games last year. And he went, Oh yeah, I can see why you would think so.
Yeah.
A team with 6 wins.
I mean, let's say that the Bengals under Zach Taylor have only won 6 games before this season in 2 seasons. He was 6-25-1. I mean, the seat was warm and toasty, and they go into the season with their franchise quarterback coming back from a serious knee injury. I mean, other than the most rabid Bengals fan, the beauty of this is a great Cinderella story. No one saw it coming. It's very reminiscent of the 2008 Arizona Cardinals and the run they went on. Even the season started, we were there week 1, week 2. Joe Burrow doesn't look quite right. Still looks like he's, short arming throws. He's not stepping through the ball. He just was warming up. And he was warming up. Jamar Chase and that pick that was greatly debated was warming up. T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I mean, they've coalesced as a team so beautifully. We talked a little bit last week about the defense, very underrated. Hendrickson, Hill, and Hubbard, the law firm or audit firm, whichever you like, certainly make a difference on the defense. As Jeff said, lots of them free agents brought in, and they've actually decided to build the team that way. But for me, the coaching piece is very fascinating here. Jeff, you brought up McVay, and he's got a lot to prove. 2018, he was outcoached by a master. He was outcoached by Brian Flores. He was outcoached by Bill Belichick. And whilst Wade Phillips and the defensive plan the Rams came up with was amazing, they just weren't at the same races. But let's remember who was the quarterback's coach of the Rams that year. Zach Taylor. Mm-hmm. Zach Taylor was equally outcoached. Now, does the student become the master? It is not the same matchup for Sean McVay as it was going up against Bill Belichick before. It's going up against the disciple. And who will truly bring their team to the promised land. But yeah, Cinderella Bengals is what I want to call them other than Cincinnati. And the only problem with Cinderella is you never saw what happened after that prince found her. Did you see the wedding? Was it happy ever after? Yeah, you never really know. So
save that for next week, all these metaphors. Save all that for next week. Colin, just very quickly, this is going to be a great game next week because the Rams went full Celtic Tiger. Just Cronkies went the whole crack with Hollywood Park, everything. The mortgage payment's due. McVay has to own up. He has to pay the bill. Is he going to do it? I mean, we'll talk about it next week, but massive game.
Well, yeah, because Super Bowls equal legacy. I mean, that's the reality. And until, say, Peyton Manning got that second ring, it was always the question mark, right? Until John Elway got that second ring, there was the question mark. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have it. Therefore, there is the question mark. So if McVay loses again, there will be that question mark. I agree with Jeff in terms of the Rams should win it, right? They have the better team. But as I said the other night, the Bengals have the better quarterback. I believe that. Sorry, Dan Orlovsky, but Joe Burrow is exceptional. And Joe Burrow, I think, he's got to prove it over the time, but he has that Brady-esque pressure quality. It doesn't matter whether he's up or whether he's down. He's losing 18 points to the Chiefs at home. He goes and wins it. He gets sacked 9 times against the Titans, and his team wins it. It goes to Arrowhead. They're down 21-3. They come back to win it. Has he and Mo Egger raised this point? Burrow hasn't been outstanding, right, in the playoffs. And if you were to say to Bengals fans that, they made it through the playoffs and they were in the Super Bowl, they would have thought that it would be on the back, probably, of Burrow winning shootouts, right, of throwing all these touchdowns. And yet he's been able to elevate those around him. And you see the way they respond to him after, when they were trying to do the interview with him on the field the other day, just about everybody came up and congratulated Burrow. I think that's the impact he has had on that franchise, and I think that's what makes this so interesting.
Michael, sorry, one quick point. We're discussing so much around Joe Burrow. We haven't really looked into Matthew Stafford. There was a big trade last year. It was done very early in the offseason last January. And Matthew Stafford hadn't won a playoff game going into the playoffs. From the 3 games in which he's played against the Cardinals, the Bucs away, and obviously last weekend against the 49ers, by and large, he's been really, really good. I know he's had a few moments, but by and large, for a guy who'd never won a playoff game, he's on a bit of a run. And what we called the meltdown in Tampa a couple of weeks ago, where he allowed the Bucs to come back, you look at the components of the game and how that happened. They weren't necessarily on how Matthew Stafford played. So, and that big throw at the cup at the end. So, I wouldn't say he's a point to prove next week, but he has a great opportunity. You joked about Rodgers only winning 1 Super Bowl. If Matthew Stafford wins next week, for all the years in Detroit, he's got a Super Bowl ring very early on in his
the same as
Rams career.
Look, I think that's what does make it intriguing is the fact, and if you go back to that game, right, where they lost to that Super Bowl, they lost to the Patriots. That was where McVay lost, any belief in Jared Goff, and he knew he had to go and get somebody, and so he did. And has Stafford been at the level of a Mahomes or Allen? No, he hasn't. But he's done enough. Now, there was that sliding doors moment in the 49ers game, and I do think that's a worry, where Stafford seems to believe he can throw the ball further than he can. And he's had a number of those this year where he's thought it's going to go 5-10 yards further, and he's been undercut by defenders. The Tart dropped it for the 49ers. I imagine if you're the Bengals, you're hoping that might happen again, but that you'll get the interception. But look, equally, he has made throws that there's no way Goff could make.
Colin, that's a really good point. And I think the thing that if I was putting a line on this game, the thing that would concern me about the Rams is they have tried to give away every single one of these playoff games. And it's not just Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford didn't snap the ball over his own head. Matthew Stafford didn't drop the ball twice at running back. But in every one of the playoff games, they have gotten close to giving it away. And I'll tell you, in playoff football, it's like playing Russian roulette, and there's a live arm in there at some point. And if you keep pulling the trigger, eventually you're going to get your head blown off. And will it be this weekend? I don't think so. But, again, it's interesting. Look at the other thing, you talk about turnovers being so important. Look at the amount of interceptions that both of these quarterbacks have thrown. And here they are in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, we were talking a bit about McVay there. And I remember that 18 Super Bowl, obviously, for very fond reasons. But one of the things going in was Cooper Kupp, I think, got injured, and they just basically shifted in Reynolds as a replacement. But McVay refused to move away from his base personnel. I think he played basically the whole season in 11 personnel. He's playing a 3 wide receiver set. I don't need to do anything exotic. I don't need to do anything different. By the time they play the Super Bowl, Belichick and Flores basically ate that up. It was like, we know every player you're going to play because we've seen 94% of your snaps in the same personnel and the same style. Do you think, and you're coming from the coaching standpoint, McVay has evolved as a coach and developed to present differently?
I think he's evolved and developed. I think that part of that is because of the personnel he has now that he didn't have then. When you look at the Rams, and this is interesting because this is now what it takes in the National Football League. You got to have a quarterback, but you also have to have multiple weapons around him. And both of these teams have multiple weapons. What's interesting is we may not have any healthy tight ends in this game. Right. And the tight end is a big part of both these offenses. But what he has now that he didn't have in that last Super Bowl, he's got OBJ and he's got a healthy Cooper Kupp and he's got a Van Jefferson. And, so he's got multiple weapons now. I think he will stay in 11 personnel because right now with Higbee out, they only dressed one tight end last week. So he's got some issues he's going to have to work through.
Time will tell.
Just to finish, like OBJ, we barely talked about him. Like what a redemption story, and for the other Ohio team, but like what's I think interesting, OBJ is now WR2, and what a WR2 to have. But the fact that he is probably matured, right? Early in his career, it was like he was, probably physically maybe even more gifted. We all remember the catch, right? But then there was the boat. Then he goes to Cleveland and there's all of the drama. This year, after making the move, whether it's McVay or whether it's just himself, it's been more you feel about the team, and there was obviously the moment with Debo. But what stood out to me was, and the 49ers melted down after the dropped interception, there was an awful head-to-head, deliberate head-to-head after that. He didn't respond to it. He caught the ball, he got up, and he made the neck, moved on. And I think that's a measure maybe that the Rams, as you talked about, and McVay have matured, and they realize what's on the line for them.
That head-to-head, Jimmy Ward, the one which you're talking about, that play last weekend. When Beckham was brought in, he was brought in to complement that offense. He could have fell into his hands in a way because Robert Woods got injured literally the week in which he signed. So he became more important to the team than may necessarily would have been had Robert Woods stayed fit for the season.
Yes, Mark.
I was just going to say, to round up, because we were talking a bit about the Stafford and Burrow comparison. Every one of us here would love to be Matthew Stafford, would love to have his athletic ability, his skill as a quarterback. The fundamental difference, however, is Chuck Norris dreams of being Joe Burrow.
Every one of us here as well picked the Rams to go to the Super Bowl as well. We'll talk about it more next week. We're live on Saturday from LA at 6:30, Ireland, UK time. Join us, but also, of course, Jeff is on Sky Sports all week from Tuesday, 10 o'clock next Sunday. You got, obviously, Calais Campbell, among so many others in the stadium as well. Looking forward to watching during the weekend. Looking forward to maybe
Now,
recording.
you Irish guys, make sure you bring your sunscreen when you get to LA, please.
Oh, we'll try.
It'll be like emulsion paints for me, Jeff. I guarantee it.
Just to quickly thank Trust, Matchbook, many arcade systems, obviously Mafia on the camera, DCU for the help of Jeff later on, and American Football Ireland for all their help and support, and just quite frankly thank Jeff for his support over the last 18 months. We wouldn't be here without this, and we genuinely mean that, so thanks so much. I mean, if we could ever pay you back, we would, but I mean, there's not much we can do apart from do this.
You don't have to thank me for anything. I'm a fan of your show. I watch it every week, so I don't miss an episode.
Thanks so much for coming on, and great job on Sky, even in a 1 or 2 month stretch there. It's been great watching you, Neil, and the lads on Sky, and many more years to come, I'm sure. But thank you so much. And folks, we'll see you next week in LA. Bring sunscreen, bring a 6-pack of Harp for Adam Rank, and bring that jumper. Please bring that jumper.
I'm going to see if I can get a photograph with Von Miller wearing this.
Von Miller, we'll just shout out now. We had Phillips who's going to come on next Saturday at 6:30. His son is a tight ends coach for the Rams.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it, yeah.
Big,
that's it.
big live show.
Big live show. Brian, bring the sunscreen. Bring the
I'm
yo-yos.
more concerned about Colin than I am. I need it, but if I'm a factor 20, he's definitely a factor 50.
Oh, gee. Here, folks, thanks a million. Thanks again to all the sponsors. And we'll see you. We're back on Wednesday night. We've got Sam Monson among loads of other guests. I think 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Confirm in the next few days. Wednesday night, then Saturday night in LA. See you soon. Thanks for joining us. Slán.